Well, my name's Holly. I'm a fourth generation motorcyclist. My great-great-grandfather on my mom's side used to commute to work on a Harley Davidson, which, no offense, is probably the only Harley Davidson that's ever been part of the family, but it was a very important means of transportation. And my grandmother and grandfather in the 60s and 70s ran the local Yamaha and Velocette dealership here in Brantford. And so the family connections that have trickled down from that are numerous, countless probably. But that's how my parents met. My mom worked at the shop part-time, kind of, as she was, a young teenage gal, and my dad bought a Velocette from their front display window, and one thing led to another. And then, just growing up in the outskirts of Brantford, we had a nice farm with some property, so we had space to ride our little PW50s and TY80s, and sometimes Dad would get out one of the Triumphs or something and we'd bomb around on that. But from as early as I can remember, life was just all about motorcycles. That was how we had fun. It was the connection that, it was the thread between pretty much all of our friends. And Brantford has a pretty strong motorcycling community with trials riding and racing and all kinds of things. So it was a great way to grow up. And of course, when those are your childhood memories and your friends and your family all does it, it's kind of easy to just keep on doing it. So that's where we are today. So yeah, like 30 years later, I'm still riding a bike and still enjoying it, and I try to challenge myself. So it's not just about bombing around having fun, but it's also about riding off-road. I have a dual sport bike that I really enjoy getting off the beaten path, and backcountry moto camping kind of thing. That's what we did last week actually, and then as well as vintage racing, which is sort of a new endeavor. Started that about 3 years ago, and that is totally thrilling. Well, there is a really good reason actually why I'm into the vintage stuff. So my parents had this, or my grandparents rather, had their Yamaha Velocette dealership. My grandmother is still with us, and she still lives in the original little house that she lived in, 50 years ago when she was running the shop. And her basement is full of new old stock Yamaha parts. And it's all cataloged by hand in these little notebooks that she's made over the years. And so it kind of just made sense that growing up riding little, 1975 vintage TY80s and stuff, that would progress into buying what were, and mostly still are, affordable vintage Japanese motorcycles. So, they're reliable, they're easy to work on. A lot of what I have are two-strokes. Again, that's what I grew up riding. So it made a lot of sense. So when I got my license to ride on the road, I think it was 10 or 12 or something years ago, and my very first bike was the little green bike behind us, the little CS3C, which is actually a really cool bike and actually pretty rare too. I've only ever seen one other one. And it's a total riot. And my dad picked that up at the Carlisle, car festival in Pennsylvania years and years and years ago. So it's kind of been sitting around, and when I got my license, he's like, well, this would be a nice bike for you to start on. So I was like, okay, yeah, perfect. So we got it running, and it's an absolute riot, as you can imagine. Super fun, but of course it's best for booting around on the back roads. So after, I get my M1, I get my M2, I'm heading towards my M, and I'm thinking it'd be nice to have a bigger bike. So I decide, well, it's got to be a Yamaha, obviously. I mean, that's kind of my deal. And I thought an R5 would be really nice. And then the R5, they ran for 3 years, and it's the precursor to the RD, as you probably know. And a 350 in R5, it's a 350 two-stroke twin. I thought that would be a really nice step up from this bike. So found one in Wisconsin and picked it up, drove down and got it. But it was a restoration project that the guy had done, and unfortunately it never ran quite right. So that one is literally sitting right underneath me in the basement right now on the bench. And it's gonna get torn apart one of these days and figure out what the heck is going on with it. But in the meantime, I thought, okay, well, let's just make a bigger jump. Let's go up to a 650. And of course the XS 650 it's just such a beautiful motorcycle. And Yamaha made that for so many years. But the early years, in my opinion, the first 3 years from 70 to 72, I think are the best. If I could have found a 70, the green one, I would have bought it in a heartbeat, but those are incredibly rare and probably more money than I could afford now or then or at any point. But I found a 71. And at the pretty much same time, within a month, my partner Dean was also looking for a new motorcycle. We find out sort of almost afterwards that we just bought the exact same motorcycle, and that was somewhat telling of whether or not we should hang out and ride bikes together. So that is one of our favorite things to do, is to head out on the matching bees. How perfect is it to hear that just awesome resonance of the exhaust on those bikes. Like, those bikes sound so good, and they just hum along, and you know, you get both of them together and it's like music. My Japanese Bonneville is what I like to call it. And I mean, it really is. I mean, it's that beautiful sort of British styling with that great reliability of the Japanese. No offense to anyone, but it's true. And you get the best of both worlds. It's perfect. It's sort of the perfect motorcycle in a way. But for me, getting into it and sort of getting hooked on having a few motorcycles, because you can never have one, it just made sense to go with the Japanese stuff. So I think at this point I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7, but they're not all on the road. I try to keep 3 on the road, and that's a nice variety. So you can have a little bit of fun on the little 200, you can have a bit of fun on the 650, and then I have my modern bike on the road too, because sometimes you just need to get places without worrying about anything. Sometimes. As I started to get more involved in riding, in the technical side of riding, as I went through my 20s and stuff, I had thought about racing. I'd especially thought about racing sidecar, being monkey, because that was always a childhood dream. And in 2017, I think it was, I had the opportunity to be a monkey and do the school, because there's a training process involved, obviously, because it's insanely dangerous. And so I did that, and it was terrifying, because I had this ideal that it was all fun. It wasn't a stressful experience being thrown around on the side of a motorcycle. But yeah, the reality of it was like, okay, this is insanely risky and insanely dangerous, and I gotta be 100% committed, or this is not gonna work at all. Like, first of all, I'm not gonna have any fun, but secondly, it's gonna be dangerous. Yeah, a few minutes later, I decided, yeah, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna get over that little hump. And after that, it just turned around. It was really, really fun. So yeah, got some track time in, went around Mosport on the thing, you know, dragging your shoulder with your head 2 inches off the curb around turn 2. It's pretty insane. And really rewarding. And then I think the following year I did the fast riding school. And that was a great experience of, on a modern, reliable bike, just figuring out how to get around the track and how to do it safely, and how to start to pick up some speed and just get comfortable with that. So that was awesome. And I think the same summer, I rode my 650 out, to the Vintage Festival at Mosport, and longtime family friend Gary McCaw was there. He was racing 3 bikes there. I think he had I don't know if it was 2 Ducatis and a Velo or all 3 Ducatis, but he's been racing for decades. Raced the Alaman, raced the Varey, raced Arma, everything. And he was having a bit of a rough weekend. I think 2 of the bikes were not performing well, and he was kind of on his hands and knees wrenching on one when I was visiting with him. And so I said, Gary, have you ever thought about having somebody around to just help you out in the pits, or prep things, just so that it's even if it's just you racing, like, so that you have a little less work on your hands? And he's like, yeah, but no young person is interested in this stuff. I can't find anybody interested. And I said, well, I'd be interested. So he kind of like dropped his jaw and dropped his wrench and was like, really? So that was the start of an even better relationship with Gary. And the following year, well, the following winter, we tuned up his 250 Mach 1 Ducati and sort of fit it for me. His late wife, Mary, had raced it years ago, and he had raced it in the meantime too, since she passed. But it's just a fantastic little racer, and it's light and it's nimble, and I'm relatively light as well. So we thought this is the perfect place to start. And so that's what we did. We tuned it up, painted it up with a little scheme that I came up with. And then the next spring, we headed out to the track and started testing and tuning. And that was that. I mean, my only regret was that I hadn't started doing this like 15 years earlier, because it was so much fun. I mean, obviously racing isn't all fun and games. There's a lot behind it. But from the 250 Ducati, I also started riding his 350 Desmo. Rode that at Mosport as well, which was really fun. I'd like to spend more time on that bike because I didn't really get enough time to get comfortable on it. It's nimble like the 250, but with that just little bit of extra power can go a long way, especially on a big circuit like that, sort of wide open. I love the challenge of it. Absolutely love finding the sweet spot between control and chaos. That's how I would sum up racing. It's not always easy, and of course it's a fluid environment. Everything's always changing. You've got competitors around you. You've got track conditions. You've got this machine underneath you. It's not a push button computer controlled motorcycle that is sending you dash messages about how to use your tires or how to set up your mapping or how to whatever. This machine is talking to you in little blips of the engine, and catching your rear tire here and there, and your brakes are getting a little soft or whatever you do. It's quite the experience to ride something that has personality and character. And I mean, it's the same on the street, right? And when you're on the track and you're pushing those machines to their limit, and you're popping it over a red line on the back straight, like it's pretty exciting, and again, rewarding to find that sweet spot where for 20-25 minutes you are completely in the zone. There is absolutely nothing that's taking your mind off what you're doing. And for me, in real life, like, when do you get to do that? Because there's always a distraction, So I really enjoy that part of it. And then, of course, what's just as good or better or just completely different is the community. And like the CVMG, the Vintage Road Racing Association has the most incredible community, and just as exciting as getting on the track and crossing the finish line is getting to the track and seeing all your friends and getting 4 days with the coolest, like-minded, friendliest, most helpful, amazing people that you can find anywhere. So it's really cool to be sort of the next generation and sharing all these stories and this history with these folks who are kind of legends, you know. In my mind, Gary McCaw is a total legend. I am so fortunate that I get to race with him and he gets to mentor me and we get to just hang out in the pits, you know. Like, how cool is that? I mean, yeah, things have worked out really well as far as that goes. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm.